Hey everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're gonna make a bag that I'm gonna say it looks like a designer bag to me. I don't have a whole lot of experience with designer bags, but this bag is probably the closest to designer I've ever made. Today, we're gonna make the Scottie Convertible, and this pattern comes to us from my favorite pattern designer, Kaur Threads. If you've seen my last video where we did a Kaur Threads pattern, you might remember I had a lot to say about how perfect the pattern was written, how it might be it was the best written pattern I've ever seen, including any of my patterns. I couldn't compete with this. The way that they write their patterns is incredible. And this bag, as intimidating as it might look, is actually not that bad. It's really not. I think that if you're a beginner and you let me walk you through this, I think I can get you through this bag. I think I can. I think you're gonna love it. So let's walk through this bag. This is the Scottie Convertible bag. It is so beautiful. It is the perfect size. Not too big, not too small. It has two zipper pockets on the front panel here. We turn it around. We have a magnetic slip pocket in the back. And what makes this a convertible bag is, first of all, it's a shoulder strap bag, like I'm holding it. Second of all, it is a crossbody strap bag, like this. Third, it is a backpack. What? It is a three-way bag. You can wear this however you want, which when I think about this bag, the first thing I think of is moms and babies. When I was a new mom and I had my littles, I needed bags that can transform like this. Sometimes I needed to just pull it up on my shoulder. Sometimes I needed to wear it across my chest. Sometimes I just need to put it on my back. Convertible bags like this are perfect for new moms. So you see on the top here, we have this nice big zipper. We're gonna open this up. This is an extended zipper, so you do have your zipper tail here. Let's open this all the way, and then we open up the inside. It's so cool. So we have a zipper accent pocket, and we'll talk about that awesome design in just a minute. And then we have a slip pocket. I do not think you need to be an advanced sewer to make this bag. I think you can be a beginner. It's gonna be all about the materials that you're using. So, speaking of the materials for this bag, everything you see here, except my personal bag tag, comes from the mega box from the Bag Making Bees Club. Now, this box currently is exclusive to Bag Making Bee Club members, and I don't know if it's still available. This was such a fun box to make. It was sold over the summer. It was a pre-order. Tons went out. So many of you guys grabbed this box. It was available in two flavors, the bold, which this one is the bold, and then the neutral, which is what, neutral or natural. But that's the one we're going to be working through today. We're going to be making the other version of the mega box bag in today's tutorial. And it is so good, guys. It is so good. It comes with so much stuff. Now, I feel bad kind of showing this right now because I don't think it's available anymore. I do believe if there are extras, they are only available to people who are enrolled in the Bag Making Bees monthly subscription box, which I'll have a link for down below, as well as a link for a little explanation of what that is. However, you do not need to be a member of the club to make this bag. You can get your own material. I will have suggestions down below of great places to get vinyl. My suggestion, primarily, if you're using a domestic machine, which I am not using an industrial machine to make this bag. If you're using a domestic machine, you want a medium weight faux leather vinyl that is on the lighter side. You don't want a really lightweight vinyl, like super drapey, almost like silky, but it's a vinyl. Don't use that. That's not firm enough. Don't use the really heavy duty, dense vinyl that barely folds. On a domestic machine, you're gonna really regret that decision. Use a medium weight faux leather vinyl on the lighter side. Suggestions are down below, and you're gonna be totally fine. This is not that challenging of a bag, but it is one that you need to take your time on. So let me just show you this bag on. Let me see if I can get this. I just wanna show you how it hangs. It's so cute. I mean, look at that. It's like the perfect size, isn't it? It hangs so nice. So that's the shoulder strap. Now we'll do the crossbody strap. I'll just put this over my head. And you see, oh, would that be a good college bag? I'm not tall enough for you to see. This would be great for college students. I would totally rock this bag when I was 20 years younger than I am now. And then finally, let's do the backpack version. So we're gonna pull these sides like this, and we're gonna just put it on as a backpack. I would need to shorten the straps a little bit, but for time's sake, this is what it looks like. So cute. So cute. This bag is so cute. So thank you so much to Kaur Threads for allowing me to feature your patterns on the channel. I am such an incredibly big fan of their patterns. I have actually wanted to make this bag for quite a while. I remember when this pattern came out and I was like, there's no way. My skill set's not there. I mean, I even when I was filming this, even when I made this bag, I was kind of worried. Like when I got the materials with the mega box, I was like, I really hope I can pull this off. And it was so much easier than I thought. It's not an easy bag, but it was so much easier than I thought it was going to be to make it. And the result is just like, I mean, it reminds you of a designer bag, right? Thank you also to the Bag Making Bee Club for sponsoring today's video. You guys know how much I love the subscription box. I am actively involved in it. I help pick the patterns. We pick the materials together. Everything is decided on between Gabby, who runs Wonderground Fabrics, and myself. It is the bag subscription box that I would want. That was the goal with the subscription, is what do we want? What are things we would use? I don't want a bunch of beautiful extras that I don't have any need for. What's the material that I want to buy with my money? What material do I want to buy? I don't want the stuff that's just left over in a warehouse that doesn't sell. So this box is specifically curated every single month with our customers in mind. What are they interested in? What are we interested in? What's new? What's cool? What's different? You know, every month is something different. Sometimes you got faux leather, sometimes you got bonded nylon. It's just such a fun subscription. So if you haven't taken a look at it, I highly suggest you do. It's a great way to play with a lot of different materials, and you can pause it at any time, which I know there are months where I'm like, you know what, the bills just keep coming. I gotta pause some subscriptions. You can always do that. So go take a look at the links down below. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you've liked this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, any other patterns from Kaur Threads, leave them down in the comment section. I'm excited to go through all of them. If you make this bag using the mega box, please tag me and tag Wonderground Fabrics and tag the Bag Making Bee Club. I'll have all the hashtags and things down below. We want to see your makes. I'm so excited about this. I think that this is just a pattern you can have so much fun with. You know, even though this is all black, it still stands out. And if you started playing with color on this bag, I'm just saying, it could be wild. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so for my bag, I'm gonna use a combination of this beautiful lighter medium weight faux leather. Isn't this so nice? It looks just like real leather. It has that beautiful kind of like worn look to it, but it's very easy to work with, so great for beginners. I have about 2 rolls of this. You're gonna need like 1 full roll really just for the crossbody strap. And then you're going to need about half of another roll. So if you have 2 rolls, I think each one of these is 18 inches tall, you're gonna use about 1.5 of them. And then for the lining, I'm gonna use a bonded nylon, and you're gonna want a yard of that. And then I'm gonna use a little bit of stabilizer. I'm not using any sort of woven interfacing here because I'm not using any woven material, but I would suggest you have a full roll of the stabilizer. You're gonna need it to be at least like 44 inches wide. We're gonna use the stabilizer a lot for the straps. So that's again where if you're not making your own straps, if you're using webbing, you don't need as much stabilizer, but if you are making your own straps, you do wanna add stabilizer to it. I'm using this adhesive fleecy stabilizer, which is really nice. It's easy to sew, it's easy to work with, it's easy to stick down and then unstick. But you do want it to be pretty long. So while you're not using a whole lot of it, you are using long strips of it. Okay, so here's a bunch of the hardware and extras that we're gonna be using. For the zippers, you're gonna have 3 10-inch long zippers and 1 17-inch long zipper. All of these are number 5. I have 4 zipper pulls to go with that. Since I'm using the mega box items, I just wanted to show you this beautiful little bee keychain that goes with it. It depends which box you got. If you got the neutral, if you got the bold, they're different colors. And then we have this adorable metal bee bag tag. I also have my OklaRoots bag tag. My OklaRoots bag tag is not the same color as the rest of the hardware because I don't actually have this color in my own tag, so I'll mix it up. I'm okay with that. I also have this fun sew on bag tag from Heartwood and Hide, a few woven tags. I don't know if I'll use all of this, but I just wanted to show you all the fun stuff. And then for the hardware, I have 2 1-inch D-rings, 2 1-inch wide strap sliders, so strap adjusters, 4 1-inch wide rectangle rings, 2 1-inch wide swivel hooks, and then we have a small, you can't really see it, but we have a small magnetic snap. And then when it comes to the rivets, I believe the mega box has 13 rivets. I think I am actually gonna use 14. You can use no rivets, you can use lots of rivets. And I like to use as many rivets as possible. So I actually have some of these rivets in this color in my own personal stash, so I'm gonna add one to it. But I will make mention everywhere I go where I would definitely install a rivet if you have them, and where you could probably leave it off if you don't have them, or if you just don't want to use a lot of rivets. Okay, so here are most of the tools I'll be using today. As always, my rivet press and hole punch. My rivet press is like if the house is burning down and all my animals and kids are not in the house, and I can only grab one thing, I think I might grab the rivet press. Although this might be the one thing that survives in a fire. Anyways, the rivet press is very important to me. I highly suggest if you haven't purchased one or you haven't really learned about these, that you take a look at rivet presses. They're gonna make your bags so much easier to finish with those like straps and those little steps to really reinforce the bag to make it last longer. The rivet press is the best thing ever. And then a hole punch, of course, to go with this. And then this thread actually came in this box. Whether you got the bold or the neutral box, the thread color will be different. This is a Tex 45 weight thread. It works great in my needle. For my bobbin though, I do like to use a lighter weight thread, still polyester, no cotton thread please on bags. And this is a Mara 100 weight thread. And then my needle of choice for today is a Microtex 8012. I did not find that I had to use a thicker needle on this project. However, you should always have a jeans needle or a Microtex 9014 on hand, just in case your machine is struggling with some of the thick seams. And a bigger needle is always recommended. And then I have a seam ripper, a silver ink pen, an air erasing marker, my turning wand, a lighter, 1-inch by 6-inch ruler, a stiletto, and I also always have one of these. These are like little 1-inch by 3-inch rulers. They're really handy to have just at your sewing machine. And then I have my snips. My scissors, as always, are Kai scissors. I have these in like all the different sizes. Any one will be great. A lot of plastic clover clips, 2 double-sided tapes. I like to have it in 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch. I do suggest you always have both sizes on hand. You never know which one you're going to need. And then I will be using this template here for the zipper overlay. You could just use the pattern zipper overlay, which is like a rounded rectangle one. I designed this one for the box. It does have some details. I do just trace it out myself and cut it with scissors. There is an SVG option available, but I did want to go over this real quick because I get this question all the time. Whenever you receive a template from us, it will have a paper backing on the back of it, and this is to protect it in shipping and to protect it from getting scratched. However, you don't need to keep that paper backing on there. What you can do is you can use your fingernails, or you can even like just get like a seam rip or something and just go right where like the hole is over here. Just carefully kind of pull up that paper just enough so that you can use your hands and then pull off that paper backing. And then depending on how detailed it is, it should come off pretty easily. If you order just a rectangle, then it should come right off. These little ears might take a little bit more finagling, but it's not difficult to remove the paper. And the paper is only on the back. It's not on the front, only on the back. And now you see it's completely see-through. So I just wanted to go over that. I know that not everybody knows when you get them that you gotta take the paper off, but you're gonna like it a lot more if you do take the paper off. So let's go through our pattern pieces, starting with pattern piece A, which is going to be an exterior cut, and it's going to be that center feature panel on the front of the bag. Now this is a fun place to mix up your materials. If you're using the Mega Box, you're going to have one color of vinyl. That's the look we were going for. We were going for a very clean, not in your face design here. However, if you wanted to use the bonded nylon for this cut right here, you could. The bonded nylon still has good structure. I would say the bonded nylon is very similar in weight to this faux leather. So if you want to mix it up a little bit, that lining is really beautiful, and I think it would look cool right here in the center. Pattern piece B is going to be the 2 side panels. When you cut this out, make sure you cut it mirrored. So you're going to cut one like this, you're going to flip the pattern piece over, and you're going to cut it from the back side. Make sense? They need to mirror one another. All right, pattern piece C is your back pocket top strip, and pattern piece D is your back top panel. And while we have this, we'll go over pattern piece E, which is your back bottom panel. So in the end, you're actually going to be like cutting some of this back bottom panel down, and this strip up here is going to be kind of hiding behind it, and then you're going to build your back panel just like this. These are all exterior cuts, no stabilizer, no interfacing, nothing like that. I do want to mention that if you do want to add woven interfacing to the faux leather to give it even more structure, you can definitely do that. My bag is going to be on the slouchier side because the vinyl is more loosey-goosey. That's what I like. However, if you want that bag to really have some firmer structure, but you don't want to use a thicker material, if you have woven interfacing, attach your woven interfacing to the back of your faux leather and you're good to go. So pattern piece F is going to be the top connector, 2 cuts of exterior for that. Pattern piece G is the bottom connector, 2 cuts of exterior for that. And then pattern piece H is your exterior top gusset. Pattern piece I is going to be the bottom exterior gusset. So you're going to have 2 cuts of this. This will connect with that last pattern piece for the top. Then you have pattern piece J. You're going to have 1 cut of exterior and 1 cut of lining. This is going to be the base of the bag. And then we have pattern piece K, which is the interior top gusset. Okay, and our last bits of exterior are going to be pattern piece L, which is your zipper overlay. I'm using that adorable little bee. Like I said, all I did was trace this out on the back of the vinyl and then cut it with scissors. I have the patience to do that. If you don't, just use the oval one, or you can use a Cricut or Silhouette to cut this out using the SVG provided. This SVG is provided with the mega box. It's not provided with the pattern. Then we have pattern piece M, which is your slip pocket trim, just 1 cut of exterior for that. Pattern piece N is going to be your zipper end tab, which is just a fun little detail. Again, 1 piece of exterior for that. Then we have pattern piece O, which is your interior top panel, 2 cuts of exterior there. If you can hear my cat in the background, I'm sorry. And then you're going to have your strap ends, which is pattern piece P. You're going to have 4 cuts of this. This is for our straps. So now let's work our way through the lining pieces. First, we'll start with pattern piece Q. This is going to be your front pocket facing. You're going to have 2 cuts of this. This are for those secret zipper pockets on the front. Then we have pattern piece R. This is going to be your front pocket lining. Once again, those 2 zipper pockets on the front, 2 cuts of lining for that. And then pattern piece S, which is our back pocket lining. Now we have the main parts of the lining. You're going to have pattern piece T, which is the interior bottom gusset, 2 cuts of that. And then pattern piece U, which is the interior bottom panel. Once again, 2 cuts of that. Next up, we have pattern piece V, which is your interior pocket lining, 2 cuts of those. And then finally, your pattern piece W, interior slip pocket, 1 cut of that. So here are my stabilizer cuts that are not associated with the straps. So these are just for the bag. So first I have S1, 2 cuts of this. This is for the top connector stabilizer. Then I have 2 cuts of S2, which is going to be for the bottom connector stabilizer. And then 1 cut of S3 for the base. If you feel like you want the base to be extra supported, you could double up this. So you could cut 2 of these if you're using this sticky adhesive like I am, and just stick 1 to the back of the other and then stick it to the base. Now, for time's sake, I did already go ahead and build the long crossbody strap. I will tell you, it is very easy to do. However, it did take me about 40 minutes. So I didn't want to put that in the video. I will go over it in just a minute and give you little shots of what I did to make this strap. However, it's pretty much the same process as the shoulder strap. So I will walk you through the shoulder strap in detail. But for each one of these straps, you're going to have long cuts of a wider piece of vinyl and then the same long cuts of a more narrow piece of vinyl. And then you're going to have long cuts of your stabilizer. So refer to the pattern. We are going to build the longer strap because we don't have a piece of material that's long enough for this. So I'm going to show you how I just built the length of the longer crossbody strap, but when it comes to actually piecing this together, and the strap is really cool actually, it's very unique. I will walk you through that, but I'm just going to do it with the shoulder strap. Okay, so let's prep our stuff. Let's prep our stabilizer. So I'm going to start with the base. I have the exterior base panel and I'm laying it wrong side up, and I marked 1/2 inch from all 4 edges with an air erasing marker that is quickly fading, but that's just for my guidelines. I'm going to peel the paper off of my base stabilizer here, and I'm just going to match this up with those lines and those corners as best I can and stick that down. There we go. It's not perfect, but perfectly fine. So like I said, if you wanted to double up the stabilizer, you can. If you have the mega box, you have plenty of stabilizer to do that. You could cut a second one of these and just lay it right over the top, and then you have a very firm base. And now we're going to work with our top connector and our bottom connectors. You're going to grab the associated stabilizer for each one of these connectors. You can mark a midpoint if you'd like, or you can just wing it like I'm gonna do and just plop this right down the center of the back, just like that. If the stabilizer hangs off the side a little bit, just trim it down. So repeat this for all 4 of your connectors, your 2 bottom and your 2 top. So once you have your stabilizer applied to these pieces, you can set them to the side. Okay, another prep step is going to be marking placement for our connectors on our exterior top gusset and our exterior bottom gusset. These connectors are going to be what we use for the shoulder strap and the crossbody strap. It all comes together. So from your pattern pieces for these 2, you're going to want to make sure you use an X-Acto knife or just very carefully with scissors, cut out those rectangle windows. And you're going to use an erasable pen. So I'm using my vinyl ink pen because I can easily wipe this down. You are not going to cut these windows out of the exterior. So if you're like gung-ho, ready to start cutting stuff, do not cut these windows out of the exterior. These are for placement. This is not for cutting. So all we're going to do is we're just going to overlay this on the right side of our, I'm working with pattern piece H right now. You can use clips to hold this in place if you'd like, or you can just do your best to hold it down and just trace the inside of this window. So those are my 2 exterior top gussets. I'm going to repeat that process with the exterior bottom gussets. All right, once you have these windows marked, set these to the side. Okay, 2 other pieces that you should have printed out that are not pattern pieces necessarily, but they are guides, are piece T1 and T2. These are your stitch guides. We're gonna focus on T1 at the moment. And then I have my 2 Q lining pieces. These are the front pocket facings. What we're gonna do is we're gonna flip each one of these over and we're going to lay our stitch guide over the back of it, lining it up bottom corner to bottom corner. Use clips here if it helps. And then grab a marking tool that will not erase quickly, but will also not be seen through the material. So no dark pens or Sharpies or anything like that. And just trace this little cutout, like ovalish thing. Trace that out on the back of each one of these facings. All right, once you have that traced, you can set these to the side. So now grab your pattern piece C and flip it wrong side up, and then using your pattern piece that you printed out or just the measurements, you're going to lay this over the back of it and you're going to mark placement for your magnetic snap just like that. And if you have a material that does not have a direction, like mine does not have a direction, you'll notice this snap placement is not centered, so you will need to mark where the top is. So just mark a T so you don't forget that. You can set this to the side. So now take your pattern piece S and your stitch guide T2, flip your pattern piece over so you're looking at the wrong side. Take your stitch guide template. We're gonna line it up with the bottom edge and we're gonna make sure the curved bit is facing down. So once again, if you wanna use clips here, you can, but I'm just gonna hold it in place and trace this curved opening on the bottom. And then I'm gonna grab my pattern piece for piece S. You don't have to print this out since it's a rectangle. You could just use the measurements, but if you have the pattern piece, what you're gonna do is you're gonna lay it again over the wrong side on that same bottom edge, and we're gonna mark placement for the magnetic snap. So there we go. Once you have your snap placement done, if you have a non-directional fabric, I have a directional print, but if you had a non-directional print, you wanna make sure you mark which side is the top. So the top is the side that does not have all the other markings on it. All right, I know we have a lot of prep steps, but you'll be happy you do them now so you don't get confused later. Once we get all this done, it's just smooth sailing through the bag. So you're gonna grab your pattern piece A and your exterior piece A, and you're gonna lay it over the right side of this, and you'll notice you have a couple of these little marks on the side panel of your pattern piece. You're gonna transfer those over to your material. So I'm gonna mark them on the right side, but you could mark them on the back, I believe, if you'd like. And then also, let's mark the midpoints on the top and the bottom. To do that, I'm just gonna fold it in half, and I'm gonna use some scissors and just cut right along that fold on the top and bottom. And now you can set this to the side. I just wanted to note that you could birth this bag or do a drop-in lining. I'm gonna be doing the birthing method, but if you want to do the drop-in method, there are additional marking steps. Just pay attention to the pattern, but I'm not doing the drop-in. So now let's grab all 4 of your connector pieces, your 2 top and 2 bottom, and on the wrong side, mark a midpoint line going straight down that stabilizer. And then we can use some double-sided tape, or you can just use clips here. And we're going to cover that midpoint line with double-sided tape. I'm using the 1/4 inch wide double-sided tape here. And you can take the paper off and then just fold the long edges of your exterior back, wrong sides together, so the raw edges are meeting with that midpoint line, and they should just stick to the tape. I will tell you that depending on your vinyl, it might stick really easily or it might be a little bit more challenging. I found that this brown vinyl that's in the natural box, I forgot what color we called this mega box, This sticks to double-sided tape really well. The black vinyl in the bold box is a little bit thicker. It's a little bit firmer, so it doesn't stick quite as easily. It still sticks, it's just you might also need to use clips here to hold it in place. So repeat this with the other 3 connectors. So once you have these taped back, we're gonna flip them to the right side and we're gonna top stitch along each long edge of all 4 of these connectors at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so all 4 of our connectors are now top stitched, and we will do the top stitching around that 1/8 of an inch like we normally do. We'll do that later when we attach these to the bag. This first top stitching is just to hold it in place on the back. So you can set these to the side. So when you're building the shoulder strap and the crossbody strap, most of the method is exactly the same. The only difference with the crossbody strap is that you need to actually piece together 2 of your long strips of vinyl to create one much longer strip. So to do this, you're just gonna lay them right sides together at a 90-degree angle, lining up corner to corner, and you just draw a diagonal from the top corner down to where the bottom side corner meets. So you're just gonna draw just an easy diagonal, and then holding this in place, just sew right over that diagonal mark. After you have it sewn, just cut down the top corner, the little triangle, so you have about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I don't measure this, I just kind of eyeball it. And then you're gonna spread that seam open on both sides, and you're gonna top stitch both sides of the seam to hold that seam on the back nice and flat and open. And then once you do that, you'll have one nice long piece of vinyl that you can use just like we're gonna use with the shoulder strap. Okay, so I'm gonna walk you through the shoulder strap part here. So we're gonna take the skinnier piece of vinyl. So remember, for the crossbody and the shoulder straps, you're gonna have one wider piece and one skinnier piece. So we're focused on the skinnier piece. We're gonna lay it wrong side up. And then we're gonna take our stabilizer and we're just going to lay this right over the back of that skinny piece. And I always find that I end up stretching my stabilizer a little bit. Even though I cut it the same length as the vinyl, as I'm laying it down, I somehow stretch it, and I always have extra. So you can just cut down that extra piece of your stabilizer. And then on the shoulder strap, you're gonna measure in 3/4 of an inch from one of the shorter edges and just mark a line. If you're doing the crossbody strap, you're gonna have 2 long, narrower cuts, and you're gonna mark 3/8 of an inch in on each one of those, but only on one side. So not both sides of each one of them, just one side of each one. That should make sense. And then all you have to do is just cut down where you marked. So once again, whether it's the shoulder strap or it's the crossbody strap, you're only cutting one end. Okay, and now regardless if you're doing the shoulder strap or crossbody strap, on the back side of the wider strap, you're gonna mark 5/8 of an inch in from each long edge, and then 3/8 of an inch in from each short edge. And then we're gonna grab some double-sided tape and just lay it right along the center of those marks, which should also be the center of the wider strap. You can remove the paper from the tape. And then you're gonna take your more narrow strap and you're gonna lay it so it's exterior right side up. The wider strap is exterior wrong side up. And you're going to just lay this right between those marks. So you see your 2 straps, the wide one and the narrow one, are now wrong sides together, with the narrow one just going right along the middle. And then if you find that the narrow part overhangs that 3/8 of an inch mark on the side, just pull it up and cut it down. And you'll do the same thing on the crossbody strap. The only difference on the crossbody strap is that you're gonna have 2 cuts of your narrow strap, and once you get to the end of one while you're taping it down, just take the next strap and butt it up right against that short edge and continue taping it down. All right, now after you have that center piece taped down, you're going to mark a midpoint line going right along the top of that center piece, so it's the right side of the narrow one, but we're still looking at the back side of the wider one. And then along each of the long edges of your more wider strap, you're gonna add some 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape. And then we're just gonna remove the paper from that tape and carefully fold back these long edges so that they meet up with that midpoint line that you just drew, and tape it down. Like I said before, if you're using the bold mega box, the black vinyl is a little bit stiffer, so you might also have to use clips to help it stay in place. If you're using the natural one that I'm using, then it should be fine with just the tape. So repeat this with the other long edge of the strap. And if you'd like, you can grab a seam roller and you can just press this down, and that will help that tape really hold it in place and get rid of any little lumps and bumps that you got. Okay, so now we're gonna flip this so we're looking at the right side. The wrong side would be where those raw edges are meeting on the back. The right side is just nice and smooth. And looking at the right side of either strap you're working on, you're going to top stitch first at a 3/8 inch seam allowance along both long edges, and then you're gonna do a second row of top stitching at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along both long edges. Take your time with this and just make sure you keep an eye on your seam allowance, because it's easy to start going at a 1/4 inch instead of a 3/8 of an inch. It's 3/8 of an inch first and then 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so once you're done with that, you should have your shoulder strap, which is a nice shorter strap, and you have your 4 rows of top stitching on the front, and then on the back you do have that raw edge, but it's very hard to notice. If you use a silver ink pen, you can kind of pinch your raw edges apart and then wipe it down. I find that it's really not that noticeable. And so you can see here is my crossbody strap, which is quite a bit longer. So this process is not that difficult. It just takes a good amount of time, like a lot of time. So now we're going to attach our little strap ends. So grab your 4 strap ends, and then on the wrong side of your straps, so we can work on both of these at the same time, we're gonna measure in 5/8 of an inch from the short end, again on the wrong side, and just mark a line with your silver ink pen. You're gonna do this for both sides of both straps, and you can use double-sided tape to help with this. So I'm just gonna flip each of my strap ends up, so it's wrong side up, and I'm going to add just 1 piece of double-sided tape going from short end to short end along the back of each one of these. And then you're gonna remove the paper from the strap end. You're gonna lay it right side up, wrong side down, and we're looking at that mark on the back of our little strap here. You're gonna line up the short edge with the mark you made, and then just wrap this around to the front, just like that. And you might notice that the front doesn't go all the way down to where the back edge is. So if you're looking at the 2 short edges of your little strap end here, the front is a little bit higher up, which is good, because that means when we top stitch it, we will definitely be able to top stitch the back as well. You don't want to accidentally top stitch from the front and you don't catch the back. So do this for both ends of each strap. All right, once you have those strap ends attached, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch with the strap right side up, and we're gonna top stitch an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance right along the raw edge of each one of these straps. As you do this, just make sure you're catching the back of the strap end each time. I am gonna back stitch at the beginning and the end of each one of these little tabs. All right, once you have those top stitched, if you have like little threads just kind of sticking off the sides, I suggest grabbing a lighter and melting those down. So now looking at your shoulder strap, flip it so you're looking at the wrong side, and from each short end, measure in 3 inches and make a line on the wrong side. Then you're gonna grab a swivel hook, and with the hook side down on the right side of the strap, you're gonna just thread this on the end. Pull the end of your strap up to meet that 3-inch mark. And I'll just use some clips to hold this in place. Repeat this on the other side, threading on the other swivel hook and folding this on the back. And then we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the end of the strap. So where the tab is folded over the edge, we're going to top stitch along that end on each one of these at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, so if you're not adding rivets to the strap, I would suggest you stitch like a little rectangle around this overlay over here just to hold it in place. However, I am going to attach rivets, but first I'm going to melt down these little tails. So you could just top stitch this, or you can attach 1 rivet, or you can attach 2 rivets. Honestly, with 1-inch wide straps, I usually just do 1 rivet, so you can just use your strap tab as the guide and then mark a midpoint right in the center of your strap tab and just put 1 rivet there. The pattern does have 2 rivets. I like how it looks, but just so you know, you will be short a rivet or 2 if you're using the Mega Box, if you add rivets everywhere the pattern suggests. So if you want to make sure that you have enough rivets for everything, I would say on this strap specifically, just put 1 rivet on each strap end and you're good to go. However, I'm going to do 2, so I'm just eyeballing where to put them. You could measure them. You probably should measure them. So yeah, you could measure in 1/4 inch from each edge and just, like I said, center this on the strap end. And we're going to grab our hole punch and punch the holes out here. You want to make sure you're not punching through the top stitching that you just added when you were stitching the ends in place, okay? Because if you punch through that, then what's the point in stitching? You just broke all your threads. So I have 2 holes, and I'm going to insert 2 rivets. So isn't that a cute little look? Like I said, 2 rivets really aren't necessary. It kind of looks like 2 little eyeballs, doesn't it? It's cute. It's not necessary. If you're using smaller rivets, I think that that would probably look just fine. But 1 rivet would be perfectly suitable for this. But I'm going to repeat this with the other edge. And then grab your rivet press, insert your rivets, and just press these down nice and quick. And there you go. Isn't that shoulder strap cool? I've never made a strap like this before with the layering, but now you have a nice, thick, cushiony, you know, strap that's gonna feel good when you wear it. It's not just like a piece of webbing, you know? I mean, webbing is great. Don't get me wrong, I love it. However, this is a bag that's going to feel nice when you wear it. Okay, you can set this to the side. We'll work on the crossbody strap in the end. So I'm gonna follow the pattern for suggested bag tag placement. I'm gonna use the little bee bag tag here, the little metal one, because it's so stinking cute. And using the midpoint on the bottom edge of my A panel, I'm going to measure up 2.5 inches. And then with these types of bag tags, you always wanna make sure you know where the center of your washer is. So don't just assume that it's the center. You need to fit it onto your metal tag here. Okay, so the prongs do go in the very outer slits. So the center of this washer will be the center of my tag. So this is a tag that gets installed vertically. So I'm going to mark placement for my prongs. I like to always have a scrap piece of stabilizer on hand for these moments because you don't want to attach the metal tag to just this lightweight vinyl. You do want to give it a little bit of support on the back. And I don't think I'll ever remember to show this in the beginning of the videos, but when I use metal bag tags, I always like to use a piece of stabilizer, Beacon 3-in-1 glue, and some duct tape. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark the placement for the prongs on my stabilizer cut as well. And I'm gonna grab my seam ripper and very gently cut along those marks. It's actually better if it's a little bit smaller than your marks. And then I'm gonna insert my bag tag. How cute is that? If you're using the bold box, I will say that the matte black bag tag, it kind of hides with the matte black vinyl. It's almost invisible. So if you want it to stand out, you might want to put it in another part of the bag. However, if you like that like black on black look, then it looks so good. Okay, so what I'm gonna do before I install this is I'm gonna add just a little bit of my Beacon 3-in-1 glue to the back of the metal. I mean, just like right in the middle, because it does have these designs on the side, so I don't want the glue to poke out through them. But even just a little bit of glue helps. So I'm going to install this through those slits, glue it down, flip it over. I'm going to grab my stabilizer cut, and I don't think I cut the slits on here, so you want to cut the slits on this as well. And then I'm going to remove the paper from the back. And then just slide this over the prongs and stick it down. And then we'll attach our washer. And I'm going to fold these prongs in on themselves. If you like to fold them away, go ahead and do that. And then we're going to add a little piece of duct tape over the back. There we go, just to protect it. And you could also use your adhesive stabilizer, the foam stuff. If you want to just stick a piece of that over the back instead of duct tape, that's just as good. So flip this over. Oh yeah, it's cute. I know it's dark in here, I'm sorry. It's that time of year in Florida where it's raining all the time. So the lighting is going to be a problem today, but I'll do my best to make sure you see everything. Isn't that pretty? I love it. So now grab your 2 front pocket facings, and we're going to mark a midpoint on the top edge of each one of these. And so that is the edge that's encompassed in that little drawn rounded rectangle. And then take one of your facings, and you're going to take your panel piece A, laying it right side up, take your facing, lay it right side down, and you're going to match up that midpoint mark with the line that's on the side, on the left side. We're going to start with the left side. So right sides together, midpoint matched up to that mark on the left side. Clip these together along the long edge. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to just sew right over that marked rounded half oval looking thing. I would suggest lowering your stitch length to like a 2mm stitch length and backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that sewn on, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut the inside of that oval making about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now you see you have that inner part cut off. At the curved corners, take your scissors and just cut right into the seam allowance, getting the cuts really close to the stitching. I mean, almost touching it. We want this to smooth out really nicely. So now we're going to flip that facing back so it's wrong sides together with the exterior. Now this part can be a little tricky. You can use double-sided tape to help with this. You can use regular tape. I'm going to use clips for now. So I'm just going around smoothing it out, and you want to roll it so the lining is a little bit further back than the exterior, because the goal is to not have the lining peeking out in the end. It always kind of happens for me, but the goal is to not see the lining. So a lot of times with facings, people will choose to use the same material as the exterior. So if this facing piece instead of lining was the faux leather, then if it peeked out a little bit, it wouldn't be that noticeable. But then it's a lot thicker of a seam as well. So choices. Okay, so here it is clipped on the right side. Here it is on the back side. So this is how it should look. So now grab one of your front pocket zippers and add your zipper pull. And if you need to melt down the sides of it, go ahead and do that so you don't have any fraying. Lay your front pocket lining right side up, top on top, bottom on bottom. Take your zipper and lay your zipper right side up, and when the zipper closes, it should be closing towards the right, and you're going to line it up with the bottom edge here. You can see I made my zipper a little bit longer than it needed to be. I'm just going to use some clips to hold this in place down here. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along this bottom clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance with a zipper foot, backstitch at the beginning and the end. So once you have that zipper stitched in place, we're going to fold the zipper down so it's right sides down and the lining is still right side up. So this is what it should look like. And then when we flip this over, so the zipper is right side up, you should see the zipper closes towards the left and the lining is now wrong side up. So we're going to rotate this so that the zipper closes towards the top, the lining is wrong side up on the right side. Now we're going to grab some double-sided tape and we're going to add the double-sided tape to the right edge of our zipper tape, right along the edge. Do your best to keep this as flat as possible. If you feel like you need to use tape on the back of your zipper to flatten it out, go ahead and do that. So now, before I remove the paper backing, I want to show you what we're trying to do. What we want to do is we want to take our A panel, we're going to lay it right over the right side of that zipper, and we're going to line up the top and bottom of our facing with the zipper, just like this. It's a little complicated because of how everything is folded, so we're just going to do our best. So we're going to make sure this is nice and flat, and we're going to take the paper off our double-sided tape, and then I'm just going to remove a few clips along the top edge here. And just so you know, if the double-sided tape touches your plastic clips, it's coming right off. It's the one thing it loves to stick to. And I'm trying to line up the short edge of my facing with the side of my lining pocket here. Just like that. And then the top edge of that opening is going to line up with the raw edge of my zipper. So I'm going to clip those together right there. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to repeat that. So I'm just lining up edge to edge and top to top. Okay. Once I have the tops clipped in place, then I can just remove my clips. And I find that just using the clips for a little bit really helps to press that seam. And now we're going to gently push this down onto the tape by the zipper. So just go around, readjust as you need to. But it actually looks pretty good. Do your best to get everything rolled out just the way you want. Double check that the zipper is closing when it goes up. There we go. So once you're happy with this, we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to top stitch right along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, holding this main panel to the zipper. Go slow, use a zipper foot, and back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so once you have that top stitched on, we're going to flip this over, and we're going to pull the lining panel right sides together so that the bottom edge is matching up now with the zipper side. Make sure the sides match up. You don't want to twist this, you want to make sure it's nice and even. And then clip it to the edge of the zipper. And then flip this up, and let's look at these sides first. So before we baste that down to the zipper, we want to close the sides, because if you do the zipper part first, you won't be able to close all the way to the top on the sides. So flip the main exterior panel out of the way, flatten out this pocket, and clip the sides I'll give you a better look in just a moment. Okay, I'm gonna flip it out from the top edge as well. So I'm pulling the top exterior away. So now you see if I have my main panel up like this and I fold the top and the bottoms down, I can see the side edges of my pocket. I know this is a little hard because it's like the top of the pocket's over here, but the top of the panel is over here. I know, but the sides of my zipper pocket I can see are clipped here, and I want to sew along each one of those sides at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so once you have those sides sewn, now you can flatten everything out by the zipper, and then we can take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna baste along that clipped edge by the zipper at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, and that's how you install one zipper. So we're gonna repeat that with the other side. I am gonna walk you through it, but at a bit of a quicker pace. So once again, grab your facing and you're going to lay it right side down, match up the midpoint with the mark on the right edge this time, and clip these right sides together. Make sure you move the lining pocket from the other side out of the way and take this to the sewing machine and just stitch right over that marked line, lowering your stitch length to about a 2 millimeter stitch length. Once you have that sewn, you're going to cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the inside away from the stitching, and then cut some little perpendicular slits into that seam as close as you can to the stitching so that it will have smooth corners. And then flip your lining and exteriors wrong sides together, smooth out that seam, and use clips or tape to help hold it in place. All right, once you have that seam pressed, you can set this to the side. So take your front pocket lining and lay it right side up, and take your front pocket zipper and lay it right side up, but this time when the zipper closes, it's gonna close towards the left. So they're both right sides up, zipper closing towards the left, and then attach it to the bottom edge of your lining. And now sew along this bottom clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that stitched in place, you're going to press your zipper so it's right side down, lining is still right side up, and we can flip this over and press it once again. If you'd like to use double-sided tape on the back of this to flatten this out, you can. You could also stitch along this edge. You could take this to the sewing machine and you could just baste right along the edge of this zipper tape to hold it nice and flat, whatever's easiest. I'm gonna grab some double-sided tape and I'm going to just tape along the edge of the zipper tape. I'm also kind of taping it down to the lining as much as I can. You just want to make sure your double-sided tape doesn't go past your stitching that you just made. As long as it's not over the stitching, you're fine. So now we're going to take our A unit, once again moving the zipper pocket that's already installed out of the way, and we want to overlay that opening on the right with our zipper. So we're going to line up the tops and bottoms just like we did previously. I'm going to remove my clips. So I'm just lining up the facing with the side of the lining pocket, and then I'm also lining up the top with the edge of my zipper. So I do the sides first, and then I'll do the other part. Okay, so once I have those edges done, I'm just gonna flip this all up, move my zipper pull away. Your zipper, when closing, should be going up. Take off the tape paper, remove the clips from the seam, and then gently press this curved seam over your zipper, making sure you are covering the stitching and everything looks good. There we go. So just double check that when your zipper closes, it goes up, and then we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to just top stitch along the rounded edge at a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Isn't that looking nice? So now let's flip this over and we'll pull the lining panel right sides together, match up the sides and match up the short edge with the zipper tape edge. And then flip this to the right side, pull the top and bottom edges of your exterior panel away from the lining, and we're going to stitch, and also make sure you pull the other pocket away from that new pocket, and we're going to stitch along the two edges of our lining pocket at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, once you have the two sides sewn, then we can take this back to the sewing machine and just baste along the edge by the zipper at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those sewn on, flatten out the bottom edges of each lining pocket. So you can press it with an iron or just press it with your hands, and then you're gonna fold them over one another And now you have the center done of your front panel. So now we just need to attach the sides, which is pretty easy. And those are not the right sides. Those are backwards, like this. There we go. So let's start with the left side. We're going to take the left side front panel. We're going to lay it right sides together with the left edge of our middle panel. Use your clips and clip along these long straight edges. If your material is a little stretchy, just make sure it doesn't stretch. Make sure it all stays the same size. Now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then once you have that side stitched in place, you're going to press it back so it's right side up. Isn't that pretty? And then we're just going to go take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along that seam with the seam behind the side panel at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, so the left panel is attached. I'm going to repeat that process exactly for the right panel. I'm going to do that off camera because it's going to be a long video anyways. It's the exact same process. Stitch it down at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, press it open, top stitch on the side at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. There you go. So once you have these sewn on, you might notice that the sides don't quite match up perfectly on the tops and the bottoms with the main panel. That's usually just because of the zippers. So when we attach the zippers, sometimes we kind of shrink the panel. That's fine. This is going to get eaten up in the seam allowance in the end. I'm not worried about it. If you're concerned, you can trim it down so it smooths that out a little bit, but otherwise it's perfectly fine. So I'm not doing the drop-in lining, so I don't have to mark anything. If you are doing the drop-in lining, you're going to need to make some extra marks, but you can set this to the side now. So now let's work on our back panel. So you're going to grab your back pocket top strip, and remember you marked a little dot here for your magnet. Now, one thing I want to make sure of is that it is centered. So I'm just going to fold this in half, short sides together, and pinch and make sure that my marking is right on that pinch there, and it is. So we're good. So I'm going to take one of my little washers and I'm going to center it over that dot. Then I'm going to mark placement for the prongs of my magnet. I'm going to grab a little piece of stabilizer and cut it in two so I have one for each end of the magnet. I'm going to mark those same slits on here. And I'm going to use my seam ripper and I'm going to very gently cut right along those marks. Again, smaller is better. And I'm going to cut along the marks on my stabilizer as well. You don't have to be as careful with these ones. And now we're going to take the female magnetic snap end, and on the right side, we're going to insert it into those slits. Just like that, flip it over. Take the paper off the stabilizer, if that's what you're using, and then insert this over those prongs. And then you can take your washer and insert the washer over that. Fold these in on themselves or away from one another, whichever you prefer. It's a little bit more bulky when you fold them in. So I usually take a tool and really press down on them to flatten them out as much as possible. And you can take another piece of your adhesive stabilizer and just put it over the back of that washer to cover those prongs, or you can use tape, whichever you have on hand. So here it is on the right side. So now we're going to grab our back pocket lining panel, flip it over, and you have the mark for the other snap here. Once again, I'm just going to fold this in half. I just want to make sure it's centered. Sometimes my printer can act up or something, but you just want to make sure it's right on the center, which it is. So I'm going to repeat that exact same process, installing the male snap on the right side of the lining, just like I did with the other one. Okay, the male magnetic snap is attached to the bottom of the lining panel, and we are ready to go. So with the lining panel facing right side up, top on the top, bottom on the bottom, snap on the bottom, you're going to take your back pocket top strip and you're going to line up the bottom of that top strip with the top of your lining strip. So remember, you have a T here marked on the back. So just remember that the snap, the magnetic portion is more towards the bottom edge. So lay them out right sides up together first, and then flip this right side down and line this up along the edge. And then clip in place. And now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have those stitched together, you're going to press the seam behind the lining panel. So pull them apart, both right side up, and the seam goes behind the bottom. And now we're going to top stitch right along the lining portion, holding the seam behind it at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now mark the midpoint on the top and the bottom of your back bottom panel, and then also mark the midpoint on the bottom edge of this lining panel here. So that's closer to where that magnetic snap is. And then we're going to lay the lining panel right side down with the bottom edge matched up with that midpoint mark on the top there, and clip these right sides together. And now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew right over that drawn rounded rectangle. Lower your stitch length to a 2mm stitch length, and I suggest back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn, we're going to trim down that little inner rectangle, leaving about 1/4 inch seam allowance away from the stitching. And then we're going to cut into those corners. This is just like the front panel. So we're cutting into the corners, getting our cuts really close to the stitching, but not cutting the stitching. And then flip this lining panel so that the lining and the exterior are wrong sides together. And just roll and press this seam, just like we did on the front. This is going to be a little bit easier because we're not installing a zipper. We're going to just top stitch this. But I'm still going to use clips and go around the entire seam. Okay, now move everything out of the way so you're just focused on this seam and get it nice and pressed. And we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the entire clipped curvy edge, all at 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Be mindful of the magnet on the back here, so think about that before you take it to the machine where your presser foot's going to be hitting, because you don't want that to affect your top stitching. All right, so once you get a top stitch, so let's flip this over so we're looking at the wrong side of the bottom panel, and we're going to flip up our top of our lining panel. You should be able to just snap this in place with your magnetic snap, and it should line up with the top edge perfectly. So we want to line up the top corner of our lining pocket with the top corner of our facing and clip those together. Just like we did on the front, we want to close the sides of this pocket before we baste along the top edge. Now flip this over so you're looking at the right side of the exterior, and you're going to fold back the left and right sides of the exterior panel, and we're going to sew along the two clipped edges of just the lining at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, once you have the sides sewn, then you can just focus on these top little corners up here, and you can just baste along each one of these top corners at 1/8 inch seam allowance just to hold it in place. So now grab your back top panel and we're going to attach it to the top of this bottom panel. So lay it out how it's going to be in the end, and the curvy bit is on the top, the straight edge is on the bottom, and we're going to flip these right sides together, and we're just going to line these up along the straight edges and clip together. Now we're going to sew along the straight clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have it sewn on, you're going to press that top panel up, keeping the seam behind the top panel, and just give it a good finger press or use any sort of pressing method you'd like. And we're going to top stitch along the seam on the top panel edge, holding the seam behind it at 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so your back panel is done. Before we move on, I'm going to attach my OklaRoots tag, and I like to do that higher up on the bottom of the back panel. So I measured up about 5.5 inches from the bottom midpoint mark, and that's where I'm going to install my bag tag. This is the exact same method as the metal bag tag I showed you before, so I'm not going to walk you through it again, but I just wanted to tell you where I like to put it on the back. All right, so there we go. So that's how I attach my bag tag. Here it is on the back. Your back panel is now done. You can set it to the side. So now let's work on our gusset. So you're going to take your two top connectors, which are the two longer ones, and on the back of each one of those, you're going to measure up 2 inches from the bottom and make a mark. We're going to take one rectangle ring and slide it on from the top. And then we're going to take one D-ring and slide that on from the top. And then we're going to fold the top edge of our connector down to meet that 2 inch mark that we just made. And you're going to want to add a little bit of double-sided tape to hold this in place. So I'm just going to add like an inch long piece double-sided tape to the top of the wrong side of my connectors. Take the paper off and fold this down to meet that 2 inch mark. It'll be held in place. So repeat this with your other one. So when you're looking at the back of these top connectors, you should notice the D-ring is on top and the rectangle ring is behind it. So then with the bottom connectors, we're going to do a similar thing. We're going to mark 1 inch on the wrong side up from the bottom edge and mark a line. And then once again, I have a couple pieces of 1 inch long double-sided tape on the top. This time though, we're only going to thread one rectangle ring on, remove the paper from the tape, fold that top edge down to meet that 1-inch mark on the bottom, and it'll be just like that. So repeat that with the other bottom connector. So now let's start with the exterior top gussets. Remember, you marked those rectangles on here. So you're gonna lay this right side up, and you're gonna grab the longer top gusset connector, the top connector. And let's just grab some double-sided tape and add some double-sided tape right along the back edge of this connector, not all the way up to where the hardware is, just past where it folds over. And you're gonna remove the paper from the double-sided tape. And the bottom edge of this connector is gonna go all the way down to the bottom, but the top is gonna go in that rectangle. So you see the top of my drawn rectangle? That's where the top of my connector fold goes. And the bottom raw edge goes all the way to the bottom raw edge of my exterior top gusset. So I'm going to repeat this with the other exterior top gusset. So this is why I said in the beginning that if you didn't want to mark these rectangles, you didn't have to, because you could just use the midpoint and just keep it straight, since it does match up with the bottom edge. But I find the rectangles makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now you have your top gusset right side up and your top connector right side up. Everything is just like this. Your rectangle ring on your little hardware duo over here is on the top. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure 2.5 inches up from the bottom raw edge and just mark a line with an erasable marker on your top connector. Because what we wanna do is we wanna top stitch along the side of the connector all the way up to the 2.5 inch mark, over the mark, and then down the other side. You're gonna do this for both connectors. I suggest backstitching at the beginning and the end, always starting on the bottom raw edge. Okay, you can set these two pieces to the side. Now we're gonna repeat that with the exterior bottom gusset. So once again, add some double-sided tape to the back of the bottom connectors, but make sure the tape doesn't go all the way to the hardware. It can go all the way to the raw edge on the bottom, just not all the way up to the hardware. So we're just gonna take the paper off the tape and use that rectangle once again to line up the sides and the top of your connector, and the bottom edge of your connector should line up with the bottom raw edge of the gusset. All right, this time you're gonna measure up from the bottom edge of your bottom connector 1.5 inches and mark a erasable line. And we're gonna once again take these to the sewing machine, and we're gonna top stitch along the sides up into that 1.5 inch line and then down the other side, always starting and stopping on the very bottom raw edge. You can backstitch at the beginning and if you'd like. I suggest a zipper foot for this to make it easier with the hardware. All right, once you have these stitched in place, if you use a silver ink pen, you're gonna wanna get rid of that marking. You can use an alcohol wipe, or you can just use water and a rag. And you're just gonna lift up your connectors and wipe off the silver ink pen. Take the time to do it now, because if you're like, oh, I'll do it once I'm done with the bag, it's gonna be a lot harder to do it then, and you're gonna be tired, so just do it now. Okay, so now we want to attach some rivets. Let me get these all organized. You want to attach one rivet on each of these, and I would suggest you do attach rivets to all 4 of these. This is going to have probably the most force put on them, so they do really need rivets. So what we're going to do is we're going to just measure 1/4 inch up from the top part of the top stitching and centered. So just mark a center dot on all 4 of these. Like I said, 1/4 inch up from the top of the horizontal top stitching. So then we're going to grab the hole punch and carefully punch a hole through the connector and through the gusset pieces. Do your best to make sure you don't accidentally punch through your top stitching. So I'm going to grab some more scraps here of my stabilizer, just little ones. And I just want 4 small squares. And I'm actually just going to punch a hole through all 4 of these in the center. Okay, so now we have everything punched out. We're gonna grab a rivet. We're gonna insert it through the connector, through the gusset, all the way to the back side. Then grab one of your little tiny scraps of stabilizer with the hole punched out the center and stick that over your stem of your rivet. Grab a cap and press in place. So this is what it should look like on the back. This is what it looks like on the front. Repeat for the other 3 panels. Okay, take a look at all 4 of them. Make sure they look good. There we go. Now we're gonna grab the rivet press and we're going to just press these down one at a time. This is what I love about Car Threads patterns, is that none of that was very difficult, right? It was detailed, but it wasn't difficult. And those extra detailed steps make this bag look like a designer bag. That's what it takes. Again, it's not difficult. So always remember that. Okay, so now you're gonna take one of your bottom gussets, lay it right side up. Take one of your top gusset panels, lay it right side up, and we're gonna attach them just like that. So lay it right side down, match up the connecting edges and clip right sides together. Repeat this with the other bottom and top gussets. And now we're going to sew along each one of those clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, once those are stitched, you're going to fold them both right side up and push the seam so it's behind the bottom panel, which is where it wants to go anyways. It's going to fight you if you try to put it along the top. So we're going to press the seam behind the bottom panel on each one of these, and now we're going to top stitch right along the seam on the bottom panel at 1/8 inch seam allowance on both one of these, back stitch at the beginning and the end. So now grab your exterior base panel and mark the midpoint on the two long edges, and then take one of your side gusset panels and you're going to lay it right sides together with the base panel, lining up the bottom edge of the side with the short edge of the base, and clip these right sides together. And now sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have these sewn together, flip these right sides up and then press the seam behind the base panel. Give it a good finger press to flatten it, and then top stitch right along the base panel edge of the seam at 1/8 inch seam allowance. And there you go, you have one of the side gussets attached to the base panel. I'm going to repeat those steps exactly. I'm going to do them off camera again for time's sake. So we're just going to stitch the other bottom edge of the gusset to the base panel and then top stitch it. And I'll meet you back here. Okay, the exterior gusset is now fully assembled. You can set this to the side. Now we're gonna work on the lining gusset. First things first, mark the midpoints on the two long edges of the base lining panel. Now grab your interior top gusset and your interior bottom gussets. And all we wanna do is take a top gusset and a bottom gusset, lay them just like that, then fold them right sides together and clip along their connecting edge. Do this for the other bottom and top interior gusset pieces. And then sew along each of these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now flip these both right side up and push the seam behind the bottom panel for both of these. And then you can take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along that bottom edge of the seam on the lining panel at 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now that you have the side parts of the gusset done, we're going to connect them to the base panel. So lay your base panel right side up, take one of your side gussets, lay it right side down, line up the bottom edge of the side gusset with the short edge of the base, and clip these right sides together. So now we're going to sew along the short clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So now we're going to press this open and press the seam behind the base panel, and then top stitch along the base panel edge of the seam at 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now you're just going to repeat that exactly with the other side. Once again, I'll do that off camera, but just sew the bottom edge of the other side gusset to the base panel and then top stitch it. And there you go. Now you have your lining gusset. All right, so now we're going to attach the lining zipper pocket. So for that, I am using my adorable little bee cutout, and then I have my zipper pocket to go with it, and then I have a little tag here, and we'll also need the lining for the pocket. But to get started, we are going to lower it down a little bit versus what the pattern suggests. So first, let's mark the midpoint on the top and the bottom of this lining panel. So I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but I marked a rectangle that is 8 inches wide by 1/2 inch tall. And the top edge of this rectangle is 2.5 inches down from the top of my lining panel. And this rectangle is centered, okay? The pattern has it a little bit higher up, but I'm using a zipper accent that's a little bit taller, so I needed to lower it just a bit. So I only lowered it by 1/2 inch, so when I stick it on, it'll look like this. It's so cute, isn't it? So I used an air erasing marker, so we gotta be quick because it does not last long on nylon. So I'm gonna grab my double-sided tape, and I always like to add double-sided tape on the wrong side of zipper accents right above and below the rectangle. And then if you have any other like extra details that you're worried are gonna kind of wobble around, you can add some there. Like you could add a tiny piece to the antenna if you'd like. I think I might do that. Just any spot you think might give you trouble when you're top stitching, add some double-sided tape behind it and it will make it a lot easier. Okay, so now we're gonna tape our overlay over that window. So that rectangle right there is the same size as the window in my zipper accent. So we're gonna just stick this over it. So I only took off the paper off of one of the long pieces of tape, not off of both of them. I find it's easier just to work on one at a time. So once that's stuck down and I'm happy with it, I can lift up the bottom edge and pull the paper off of that. Make sure that it's matched up with my rectangle. And then I'll take the paper off my little antenna so those stay in place. So regardless of what shape your zipper accent is, you're gonna top stitch around the edge. Now, before I do that, I always forget this. I'm gonna add a little tag too. So I'm just gonna lift this bottom edge up and just kind of tuck this in right in the corner, just like that. Well, it's cute, just peeking out like that. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch around the entire outer edge of this zipper accent. I know, the one I'm using is pretty intricate, so I gotta go really, really slow here. I usually like to use my zipper foot. I find I just can see a little bit better with that, but really, like I put my machine on the slowest it will possibly go, turtle mode here. Take your time. The one in the pattern is gonna be a lot easier because it is a simpler shape, but you can definitely do these complicated shapes too. Okay, that step can take quite a while, but let it take a while. You don't want to screw that up. So as you can see, I left the tails really long on the beginning and end. I did not backstitch. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the bobbin threads and I'm going to pull on them to pull the top thread to the back side of my lining panel. And then when I have all four of them back here, if you look at the right side, you can't really see where the stitching started and stopped, which is a nice look. So I'm just gonna tie these into 3 tight knots and cut down the threads. So now we wanna cut the center out of the inside of our zipper accent. So we're just going to pinch and cut right along the center of my lining. So I'm not cutting that exterior zipper accent. I'm being very careful not to cut that. I'm just cutting the lining right in the middle, and then I'm going to tuck my scissors underneath the side and cut into there as well. And then you can flip this over and pull up the lining away from the zipper accent and cut the lining out of the window. So I just pull it up as much as it will let me with the tape there and then trim it down. This doesn't have to look good. You just don't want any of the lining showing through that window. Alrighty. Looking good, right? So now grab your zipper tape and add double-sided tape along both long edges, right along the very, very edge. I'm using 1/4 inch wide, but you might want to use, actually I think I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch wide just to be careful, just to be safe. Okay, so now with the zipper right side up, and when the zipper closes, it closes towards the left, I'm going to take the paper off of the top edge of the double-sided tape, and I'm going to center my window over the zipper, pulling up the sides, make sure I have about the same amount of overhang on each side, and tape this down. And then I'm going to flip up the lining, push the zipper pull into the window, take the paper off the tape, and flip it back down. And now you can move this around as necessary. The goal here is to make sure the teeth are centered in that opening and that you have about the same amount of overhang on each side, and then neither of them is too close to the window. So now take one of your interior pocket lining panels and add some 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape along the top edge of this lining panel. And we're going to flip our main lining panel so it's wrong side up. We're looking at the back of the zipper. And then we're going to take the paper off of our double-sided tape on the lining panel. And we're going to flip this so that that top edge is facing down. It's towards the bottom, and the whole panel is wrong side up. And we're going to tape it to the bottom edge of our zipper, making sure it's centered. So now we're going to flip this over with that lining panel sticking out the top just like that. And we're going to top stitch right along the bottom edge of that window on our zipper panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Have it go past the 2 side edges by about an 1/8 of an inch as well. It doesn't have to be too exact, just kind of eyeball it here. Once again, leave the threads long and tie them off on the back when you're done. All right, once you have that top stitched on, keep it folded up just like that. And then the pattern says to actually add another piece of double-sided tape just below the stitching on the edge of that lining panel. Take off the paper and then fold that lining panel down and press right along that fold, sticking it to the tape. This will help prevent the zipper from catching the lining when you're using it. So clever, so clever. So now add the 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape to the top edge of the other interior pocket lining panel. Take the paper off. And with the zipper facing wrong side up, we're going to lay this right side down. So it's right sides together with the other zipper lining panel. This time we're gonna match up the sides with the lining panel and the top edge with the top edge of the zipper. And now we're gonna flip this so we have the main lining panel right side up. And with all the zipper panels facing down on the back, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along the short edge, over the long edge, and then down the other short edge. You're gonna be connecting your starting and stopping stitches with the starting and stopping stitches you have already on the bottom. Once again, leave the tails long, tie them off on the back. All right, that's looking so good. So let's flip this over. And on the bottom edge here, you should have one of your lining zipper panels that's overhanging the other, not the main lining panel, just the zipper lining panels. Trim down the longer one so they're both the same size. So on the bottom edge of these two lining panels, fold them up about 1/2 of an inch. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm folding them both up on the same side. I'm not folding them separately. I'm just keeping them together. Folding them up by about 1/2 of an inch and clip. And then add some clips to the sides. If you have tape here, pull that zipper or the sides away and clip the sides of your two zipper pocket panels. And now flip this over so we're looking at the right side of the main lining panel. Fold the left and right edges up and away from the back. Again, pull, if anything's stuck with tape, pull it away neatly. And now we're gonna sew along each side of the interior lining panels at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, making sure you're back stitching well over the bottom edges where you have that fold over, because we will be using this later for turning the bag. Okay, this lining panel's done. You can set it to the side. So now we're gonna work on the slip pocket. So grab the interior slip pocket piece, and on the back side, you're gonna measure in 1 inch from the left and right edges and draw vertical lines. And then right outside those two lines, add some double-sided tape. And then we can just take the paper off the tape and fold the side back, wrong sides together, so that the raw edge meets up with that 1 inch mark, and then just tape it down. So do this for both the left and right edges. Now we're gonna bring the bottom and tops together, folding this in half wrong sides together. So it's right side out, and then clip along that top raw edge. And now baste along this top clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now grab your slip pocket trim, and on the back side, draw a midpoint line going right along the center between the two long edges, and then add 2 pieces of double-sided tape, one on each side of that midpoint line, with your slip pocket facing whatever side you want to be up. If you have directional print, then it should be the way you want it. Lay it right side up, take the paper off the bottom double-sided tape of your trim, and then overlay your pocket so that the top raw edge meets up with that midpoint line. Stick that in place, and then take the paper off the other piece of double-sided tape and wrap around the trim so it just hugs that top edge. And now if you have some overhang of your trim on the sides, cut that down. And now with your pocket right side up, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch right along the bottom raw edge of that trim at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. And I forgot to mention this before we took it to the machine, but I wanted to add one of my little tags over here. It's really cute. It's a little big, but it's okay. But it's cute because up there it says, "Hey you," and then when you flip it over, it says, "You're amazing." That's sweet. So now grab your main lining panel, and using the midpoint mark on the top edge, we're going to tape our slip pocket 3 inches down. So I just use my silver ink pen to mark a midpoint on the top of my trim, and then I just use some of the surgical tape on the sides here to hold it in place. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this to the sewing machine, and we're gonna top stitch along the sides and the bottom, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure you back stitch really well at the top edges here. So now this part is optional, but if you wanna divide this into 2 pockets, you can use the midpoint marks on the top and the bottom of the main lining panel and an air erasing marker or water erasing marker, and just mark a vertical line separating the two. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna start at the bottom of the pocket and top stitch up one side of the line and then go back down the other side. If you're gonna be adding the 3 rivets to the top edge of this slip pocket, then you're gonna top stitch only along the lining piece. You're not going to top stitch on the trim. If you're not adding rivets, then you're going to want to top stitch all the way from the bottom over the trim, up, and then back over the trim and down to the bottom again. The count that I gave you in the beginning of the video did not account for these 3 rivets. So if you have the mega box, you're probably not going to have enough to do all the exterior and the interior. But if you have your own rivets, these are 3 additional spots where you can add the rivets. I am going to do that. So I'm just going to top stitch from the bottom up to the bottom of the trim and back down. So I was going to add rivets to this, but I forgot when I was top stitching. So now I'm not. So if you wanted to add your 3 rivets, you would add 1 in each corner and then 1 in the middle over that middle top stitching. But that's optional. I'm gonna leave the rivets off since I messed it up anyways. So the last thing I'm gonna do on this lining panel is add my sew-on bag tag. So I just centered this and I measured 2 inches down. It's very close to the top of these pockets, but I think it'll be okay. So I have it taped down and I'm gonna top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so this panel is done. You can set it to the side. So now let's work on the zipper. So take your long zipper, attach your zipper pull, and on the end that's going to open when you open the zipper. So when I move the zipper towards the right, the left edge is what opens. That's the edge I want to work on, is the left edge over here. You're going to grab a ruler and mark 3/4 of an inch in from the short edge on each side of the zipper tape, and then separate your zipper tape end just like that. And then at that 3/4 of an inch mark, you're going to pinch the zipper wrong sides together so the coils go up and away from the center, and then you're just going to fold that pinch up and tuck it underneath the zipper teeth, and then use clips to hold this in place. So you see your zipper should now be at a right angle. So we're going to repeat that on the other side, just pinching it so that the coils go away from the center, and then clipping it in place. And you can use double-sided tape to help with this. You can use glue to help. A lot of times just practice is the best thing. A stiletto will be helpful for you at the sewing machine for this part. But now what we want to do is we want to baste along the sides only where that fold over is at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold that zipper just like that. So once you have the opening basted, you see when you close the zipper, it won't come off. So that's very helpful. So now we're going to work on the other end, the closed end. So grab your little zipper tab here. And I just added a couple pieces of double-sided tape to the back of it. What I'm going to do, you can mark a midpoint if you want, but I can actually just kind of eyeball this. I'm going to fold it in half and just wrap it around the end of my zipper, making sure all the edges match up and the zipper tape is centered. If you need to, you can always move it around. So make sure it's taped in place really well. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch only around the curved edge. So from the fold around the curved edge up to the other side of the fold at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I would back stitch at the beginning and the end. You do not have to top stitch over the folded edge, but you can if you want. All right, isn't that a fun little detail? So this is another place where there's optional rivets. You do not need to attach rivets to this, but it looks really cool. So I'm gonna attach a couple of rivets, but like I said, I will have to be reaching into my personal stash of rivets in order to do all the rivets in the bag that I want. So I'm just gonna add a rivet on each side of the zipper teeth. You can kind of feel where the zipper teeth are in the middle. Just center a dot on each side. Once again, making sure you're not gonna cut into any stitching. So I'm just going to use my hole punch and punch out holes at each of those marks, and then just insert the rivets, and we'll grab the press and press them down. So now grab your lining panel that has the zipper pocket, and on the top left corner measure in 1.5 inches and make a little mark on the top edge, and on the top right corner measure in 2 inches and make a mark on the top edge. On the lining panel that has a slip pocket, you're going to reverse that. So on the top left corner, you're going to measure in 2 inches and make a mark. And on the top right corner, you're going to measure in 1.5 inches and make a mark. So starting with the lining panel that has the zipper accent, lay it right side up. Grab your zipper and lay it right side up and have the open end of the zipper on the left. And you're going to match up the open end with the mark that is 1.5 inches in, and clip together. So your zipper doesn't go all the way to the edge, it starts right there at that mark, and then clip along this top edge all the way until you get to the 2-inch mark on the top right. Now where you see that 2-inch mark on the top right edge, transfer it onto your zipper tape. So now take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Start just past where the zipper opening is on the left and stop right at that 2-inch mark that's on your zipper. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. So now take that tail of the zipper and pull it down and just kind of clip it low like that. So now grab your interior top panel and lay it right side up, and we're going to put it on the top of the main lining just like this. So the curved edge is going to be on the top. We're going to fold this right sides down, long straight edges together, and clip along their connecting edge, corner to corner. Make sure that zipper tape is pulled down and it's not up in the corner on the top right. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn, you're going to flip the seam so it's down behind the bottom part of the lining. So the zipper is going to be folded wrong side up. Give this a good press, once again keeping that zipper out of the top right corner. And then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch right along the bottom edge of that seam at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, so that's how you attach the zipper to one side. We're going to repeat that with the other side, but now we got to do it while it's already attached. So grab your other lining panel and lay it right side up. We're going to rotate our zipper. Keeping the zipper right side up, we're going to work on the edge, obviously it's not attached. And you're going to line up the open end, which is now on the top right, with your mark that is 1.5 inch in from the top right corner. And the teeth that are curved up and away is what I line up with that mark. Once you get down to the 2-inch mark on the top left, make sure you transfer that to your zipper tape. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the zipper tape, making sure you do not go past that mark that's on the top left, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so on this side that has the zipper pull, since this is open on the closed end, we're going to tuck that down and we can just kind of clip it over here on the left to hold it out of the way. And then grab your remaining interior top panel and you're going to lay this right side up. Just make sure you have it, you know how it's going to be attached. Lay it right sides together with the top edge of the interior bottom panel and clip along the straight edge. And now let's sew along that clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, making sure you keep the zipper tail out of that top corner. And now remove that lining panel that you're already done with out of the way so you're not distracted. And then fold the top interior panel up and away from the bottom panel, and the seam and the zipper is all going to go behind the bottom panel, so you're looking at the wrong side of the zipper now. And we're going to top stitch right along the seam on the bottom lining edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so just test this out and make sure it all goes the way it's supposed to. I'll twist it around. So you can close the zipper and you see that's the inside of the bag. It's pretty cool. Okay, so now we need to put together the bag. First thing to make sure of is that you have the midpoints marked on the top and the bottom of each main panel, so exterior and lining, and also the midpoints marked on the bottom base panel of the lining and the exterior gussets. So let's start with the exterior. So take the exterior front panel, which has the 2 zippers, and lay it right side up. And then take your exterior gusset and you're going to lay it right side down, matching up the midpoint on the base panel with the midpoint on the bottom panel in the front, and clip together right sides together. So we start with the midpoint mark first, and then we'll go up to the corners. So the top left corner of our gusset matches up with the top left corner of our main panel and clip those together. Do the same thing with the top right corners. And then we can go around just clipping all the straight edges, which there's not a whole lot of straight edges, but mostly straight edges. I'm going to save the bottom corners for last, so I'll do the base and the sides first. So once you have the bottom and the sides clipped, you can flip this over so you're looking at the back of the main panel. And you want to tuck in these corners into the gusset and then just clip around here. Now, depending on your material, you might need to cut into the gusset, only the gusset, not the main panel. You might need to cut into the gusset to help it spread around the corners. I find that this material has a bit of a stretch to it, so I might not have to do that. However, I do keep scissors next to me at the sewing machine, and if I feel like that gusset just keeps pulling away from the corner and it won't stay put, then I'll cut into it to help it. So it's really just need base. When I used the black vinyl in the bold mega box, it was stiffer, so I did need to cut into the gusset, just little slits like the pattern shows, to help it really stretch around those corners. But this is a lighter material and it has a natural stretch to it. I might not need to. So now I'm going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. I'm going to use a zipper foot because I find it's easier when going around corners to use a zipper foot. I like to keep the gusset wrong side up when I do this. If you prefer to sew it with the gusset wrong side down, go for it. I don't think it works very well, but if that's how you prefer to sew it, then you can sew it. If you have no preference, then maybe try one of each. See how you like it. Just take your time, use a stiletto, and like I said, keep scissors next to you at the sewing machine in case you need to cut into the gusset to help it spread around those corners. This shouldn't be too difficult. That was some smooth sewing. This material has just the perfect amount of stretch to get around those corners. Doesn't this look good? Let's take a peek. Let's take a peek. This is my favorite part. Because you work so hard, and then you're like, I wonder what it's going to look like. Oh, it's going to look so good. It's going to be so slouchy and pretty. Oh, it's going to be a good one, guys. Okay, so we want to repeat this with the back panel. So lay your exterior back panel right side up. Take your unit you've already sewed, lay right side down. Gusset right sides together with the back panel. Line up the midpoint marks and clip together. And then match up both top corners and clip together. Then once again, clip around the sides and then save the bottom corners for last. So once again at these corners, I'm just wrapping the gusset around the back panel's rounded corner. I don't think I need to cut into it. Again, I think just like the front panel, it'll stretch just enough. So I'm going to take my unit and lay it so that the gusset is wrong side up, and I'm going to once again sew around the entire clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Use a zipper foot and a stiletto and take your time. Okay, so now we can trim down this seam allowance a bit, but we don't want to trim down the top edge. So we're going to measure down 1.5 inches from each top corner of our seams. So we'll have 4 total. And just mark in the seam allowance where that is. It doesn't have to be terribly precise. We just don't want to trim down that top seam allowance. Okay, and if you were using really stiff, firm vinyl, you might want to do a second row of stitching around the 2 that you just did, just outside of the first row, but not within that top 1.5 inch from the top edges. This is lightweight enough. I don't think we're going to have any problems. So starting at that 1.5 inch mark, I'm going to just trim the seam allowance down pretty much in half. You can just trim off 1/8 of an inch if you'd like, but I find it's easier to just mostly do a half cut all the way around. Okay, your exterior is complete. We can set this to the side. So now we gotta build the interior. So let's start with the lining panel that has the slip pocket and just move the other one up towards the center like that. And then grab your gusset and lay your gusset right sides together, matching up the bottom midpoint marks first and clipping together. And then just doing your best to keep the other lining panel out of the way. We're going to go corner to corner just like we did on the exterior. And then we're just going to clip all the way down the sides and then do the corners last. So this part is a little tricky just because you have the whole unit attached. It's hard to kind of organize everything. So just tuck in those corners. You can once again cut into the gusset around these corners if you'd like to help it spread. I honestly don't really mind a little bit of pleating or pinching on the lining because I don't feel like it's that noticeable. But if you want it to have that perfect look, then go ahead and cut into the gusset and let it spread around the corners. Okay, so once again, move everything out of the way. I'm going to sew this with the gusset wrong side up. And we're going to start sewing on the top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then once we get past that top part of the lining accent, we're going to increase it to a 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around the bottom to the other edge. Once we get up to the other interior top side gusset accent piece, we're going to decrease the seam allowance down to a 3/8 of an inch. So just remember 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on the top, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on the bottom, backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so you have your gusset attached to one side. Now we're going to repeat with the other side. So once again, lay your gusset and lining panels right sides together. Match up the bottom edges. So we're pretty much going to do the same thing here, except we're going to leave a hole on the bottom. So don't jump ahead. Let's just start sewing. Leave a hole on the bottom edge. We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, let's get everything clipped. So all the corners, midpoints, sides, everything nice and clipped together. Make sure that zipper doesn't get in the way, and also make sure your zipper is straight. Which mine is not. Mine is twisted. Oh, I'm glad I caught that before I sewed this. My zipper, you see when I try to close it, it's twisted. So, good thing I tested that out. So you need to make sure you flip this around so it will close. It was just one part was twisted, so let's see. Okay, that's good, okay. Ooh-wee. So make sure that zipper end stays out of the seam. So just tuck it in. You don't want to accidentally sew over that. Okay, so we're going to sew this just like we did the other panel. So we're going to start at a 3/8 inch seam allowance on the top, work our way down past the little accent, and then increase it to a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I marked pretty much the width of the base panel. So whatever the base panel is, I just marked from like seam to seam on that. Once I get to that first mark, I'm going to backstitch well, but then I'm going to lift up my needle, jump over the base panel, and then continue at the other mark, add a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and work my way up. Once I get to that side accent on the gusset, then I'm going to decrease my seam allowance down to 3/8 of an inch and backstitch well at the top. So same thing we did before, except you're leaving a nice big hole on the bottom of your lining panel. All right. You guys, the rain is back. We started with rain, we're gonna end with rain. So now what we wanna do is trim down the seam allowance. I'm only gonna trim the bottom lining portions. So the exterior material on the tops, I'm just gonna leave that. But the rest of the seam allowance, I'm gonna trim down pretty much in half again. Maybe a little bit bigger than half. And right now I'm doing the side that does not have the opening. So don't trim the opening side just yet. Just work on trimming this. And go slow when you do this. Sometimes we can be kind of tired and a little reckless with this step, and then before you know it, you accidentally cut a hole into the main part of your lining. Oof, no good. So for the seam that has the hole in the lining, you can trim down the seam everywhere there is stitching. So where the hole is on the bottom of your lining, don't trim the seam allowance down there. You're gonna wanna leave that nice and long. It's gonna be helpful later. So I'm just gonna trim up to that mark and then cut it down. And then just like with sewing, I'm just gonna skip over that opening and continue trimming down my seam allowance on the other side. All right, we're just about there. The pattern's gonna have you use double-sided tape to tape open these seams. I tried that on the last bag and it was more of a headache than it was worth for me. Maybe I just don't have very strong tape, so I'm just gonna leave that. So since we're doing the birth method, we're gonna flip our lining so it's right side out. And this lining is so cute, isn't it? So the exterior is wrong side out, the lining is right side out. We're gonna insert the lining into the exterior so that they're right sides together. The zipper pocket panel is gonna go against the back panel, okay? So the back panel has that magnetic snap. Those two panels, the zipper pocket, lining panel, it's gonna go right sides together with that back panel. And then we can start matching up midpoint marks. So get the midpoint marks on the two main lining panels, the front and the back. And then we're gonna go over to the side over here, spread open those seams. If you've taped them open, that's great. I'm just gonna spread them open with my fingers, and we're going to line up the seams and clip these right sides together. So do this for all 4 of your side seams. Make sure your zipper is tucked down in between the lining and the exterior. And then once you have your midpoints and your seams all clipped together and lined up, then you can go around the rest of the top edge, just clipping everything right sides together. And it should all line up really well. You shouldn't find that anything is too big or too tight. And then before we sew this, make sure you reach in and look at your top connectors here and make sure none of the hardware is pointed up because it will get in the seam. So when you clip your gussets, just check those bits of hardware. You don't want to accidentally sew over that. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Go nice and slow. Take your time here. Again, I like to use a zipper foot. Use a stiletto. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. If you have really thick material, do a second row of stitching just outside that first row, just a little bit closer to the raw edge, just to reinforce it. Alrighty, so now if you feel like you need to, you can make little cuts into the curved part of this top seam just to help it spread. I will say that this brown vinyl I'm using, it probably doesn't really need it because it has a nice natural stretch to it. But just to be sure, I'm going to cut in here and there. Now pull the lining out, and then with that hole in the bottom of your lining panel, pull the exterior through that. This is when it's all coming together. Let's make sure nothing crazy happened. I'm gonna tuck the lining into the bag. Now remember, where the zipper is not the top edge of the bag. The top edge of the bag is below that. Oh yeah, that's looking good. First thing I'm gonna do is make sure the zipper shuts. Okay, yes. Oh my gosh, I love how slouchy it is and how loosey-goosey it is. This bag is so cool. Okay, now we need a top stitch. So, this seam right here, you see where it's bubbled? That's where we need a top stitch, so we gotta flatten that out. So I'm going to use the hole in the lining to push my hand into, and I'm just gonna run my finger along the seam and add clips and roll it to get it just the way I want it. So take your time here and go around the entire edge. And then when you get to these side seams over here, just make sure the seams are still pressed open. Sometimes they'll kind of close on themselves. Just try to press those seams open because you want it as flat as possible. The problem with, you know, bags a lot of times is that the seams get too thick and it breaks a needle, the stitches skip, and it's so frustrating. And so the goal is to keep everything flat. Your machine likes consistency. It likes it all to be thick or it all to be thin, but doesn't like when it goes from one to the other. So I know some people will take like a clamp and they'll clamp down those seams to try to flatten them, or a hammer even. Hammer them down. If you're using the material that I'm using, you should be pretty good. This is not really dense material. Okay, so for me, what I'm gonna do, because I can, is I'm gonna take the bed off my sewing machine and I can just wrap this around the arm of my sewing machine and top stitch. It's a pretty big opening, so even if you had a flat bed, I bet you could just flatten this out and top stitch. If you can't take the bed off, you can flip this so that it's lining side out and the exterior's on the inside, and then top stitch from the inside. There's lots of options here. Do whatever works for you. I'm gonna once again use a zipper foot, but you don't have to here. Just go slow. Go slow. We're gonna top stitch around this entire top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You might wanna up your needle. If you found any of these seams to be pretty thick in the last step, just change over to a 90-14 or a jeans needle. And I am going to leave the threads long once again, but I also do still backstitch a little bit, but I always start on one of the side seams where I feel like it's less noticeable. Oh, this is looking good. Oh, I love it. So good. Okay, so for these threads here, you could thread them into the seam, which I'm going to show you how to do it. I know, you guys, I'm really tired. It would be easy just to cut them and be done with it, but I want to show you, this bag is so beautiful. Sometimes you just got to take that extra step to really show off how awesome it is. So I have some needles here, just some small needles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the long threads and I'm going to thread it through my needle, and then I'm going to insert my needle into the stitch that thread is coming out of. And I'm going to carefully push it between the two pieces. So you have this seam. Think of the very top of the seam as like a butt, okay? It's going right through that crack. That's the only way I can think of it. You're going to remember it that way. But we're going to push it right through that crack in the seam and pull the thread out. So now the thread, yeah, I'm not going to be as descriptive, okay? But you see what I'm saying. So I'm going to do that for the other 3 threads, the other top stitch thread and the other bobbin, and the other 2 bobbin threads. And I want all the threads to come out the same spot in that seam. Okay, so you only need the needle for that one bit. There we go. So now all of my threads are coming out of this one spot here. If you backstitched at the beginning and the end, you can just cut this, which is what I'm gonna do. I'm just going to cut it down and just give it a good rub. I wouldn't even say you need to melt it. If you wanted to, you could, but I'm not gonna, I don't wanna risk it. So I'm just gonna kind of give it a good smush there, pull it a little bit. The threads will kind of tuck in, and there you go. Beautiful, beautiful top stitching, lovely. So now we need to close up the holes in our lining. So open your lining zipper pocket, reach your hand in there, remember this is open. Reach your hand in there and pull out the bottom of the lining panel. So the main lining panel. We have 2 holes in our lining, right? We have it on the main lining panel and we have it on the zipper lining pocket. So we want to just pull out the main lining panel bottom through that hole in the zipper pocket. You'll get a lot out, and then give it a little tug to straighten it all up. And remember, we did not cut down the seam allowance. This is why. See, now we can see it really well. So we can just easily clip along this edge. And now we're just going to sew along this clipped opening at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, just stitch to stitch, closing it up. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, once that's sewn up, you can trim down that seam allowance now, just to keep it cohesive. You know what, I have one more sewing tag and I'm going to use it. So tuck in the lining back into the main part of the bag, and then pull out the zipper lining pocket panel that's open. Remember how we folded that? If you tug on the sides, the raw edges start to like fold in on themselves. So straighten that out, tug on those sides, tuck in the raw edges so you just have a nice folded seam on the top. It's about 1/2 inch. Doesn't have to be exact. Just clip along this top edge. All right, and for my final bag tag, I'm just gonna tuck it right in this seam and clip it in there. And now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along this clipped edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okie dokie. Now just tuck in your lining. Man, oh man, you guys, this bag is so stinking cool. Oh, I love it, I love it. Look how pretty that is. And what's even cooler is that, like, I mean, it's just a cool bag, but it's also a backpack and a shoulder bag and a crossbody bag. Like, what? Okay, it's time to do the crossbody strap. Pay attention, okay? This is a bit of a puzzle, but you got it. Just don't rivet anything until you know for sure it works. Just do it one by one. I'll show you, I'll show you. First things first, you're gonna find the 2 ends of your crossbody strap, and we're gonna look at the back side of each one of them, and we're gonna measure 3 inches in from each one and mark on the back side of each of them. And now we're gonna take one of our strap adjusters, and we're gonna thread this up from the bottom of the strap adjuster over that middle bar and back out, and then line up the end of your strap tab with that 3 inch mark, and just clip it in place for a minute. Only do this for one side. Don't do it for the other side. Only do it for one side, okay? Now, you can take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch right along the folded edge of this tab at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. I will not be doing a lot of stitching overall. I'll probably do rivets for the next part only, so if you only want to do rivets here, you can. So if you're not doing any rivets whatsoever, then when you do your top stitching right there, I would suggest doing like a little X as well, maybe like a rectangle and an X. I'm going to add 2 rivets here. You definitely don't need to. You could add just 1 rivet and be totally fine, but I'm going to do the 2 rivets. So once again, I'm going to measure in about 1/4 inch from each side and about 1/4 inch from the bottom, and mark placement, and then just pop out the holes where we marked. And I'm currently using my own rivets now. So like I said, I don't remember how many rivets are in the mega box, but I remember the number wasn't as many as the maximum the pattern mentioned. So, okay. I'm going to leave those for now. I'm going to set rivets later. I'm not going to set it just yet. So now, take your bag and lay it front panel right side up. So it's the 2 zippers. Now we're going to take our crossbody strap, and we're working on the end that does not have any hardware. You're going to start from the top, and you're going to thread it down to this bottom left rectangle ring. The right side is facing the bag. The back side of your strap is facing away from the bag. So we're going to thread it down, and we're going to loop it around, so now the strap is wrong sides together. Now we're going to thread this all the way up. Keep the strap as straight, straight. Not as straight as possible, keep it straight. Keep it straight. And then insert your strap end with no hardware up from the bottom of the strap adjuster where your fold over is, up, like all of it up. So just keep feeding it through there. And then have it go over that middle bar that already has material on it and down the other side. There we go. Okay. So this is how it should look right now. So So this is how it should look. We have the rectangle ring, strap, raw edge. So now, don't worry about the D-ring. We're gonna go to the rectangle ring on the top left edge here, top left corner. You're gonna thread it under and up through the top of the bag. Okay, and you might wanna shorten this little loop over here as well. So just slide along that strap adjuster. Pull on this. All right, so this is where we're at now. So now you're gonna go up over the top of the bag, again, keeping it straight, and you're going to find that rectangle ring on the top right corner and thread it down from the top to the bottom. Always checking that there's no twists or anything, it's nice and straight. Now you're gonna grab your remaining strap adjuster. And with the edge that we're using to thread everything, we're gonna go up from the bottom and over that middle bar. And pull a lot out of here, okay? Just like that. So now, with the back side of the strap, the wrong side of the strap facing the bag, we're going to curve this end from the bottom up through to the top of the bag on this rectangle ring, just like that. And then loosen up the fold over on your strap adjuster so you have a nice big loop like that. And you're going to take your strap end and you're gonna loop it up through the top part, over that middle bar. So you're gonna thread it around that middle bar and then you're gonna pull it back down. So remember we have that 3-inch mark on the back here. We're gonna have that strap end come meet with it. And there we go. If you can take this to the sewing machine and sew along that fold over, the bottom folder of your strap end, go ahead and do that. If you're not using rivets, then like I said, do your little box and do an X here. It's a little tricky because all the stuff is in the way. I'm actually just gonna do rivets for this part. So I'm gonna grab my marking tool and I'm gonna mark my rivet placement. And then I'll take my hole punch and I'm gonna punch a hole. So this part is just wrapping around that middle bar of the adjuster. It's not going through the strap part. It's just this one little loop right around the middle bar there. And you could do just one rivet here if you'd like, or you could do 2. Okay, so let's just take a look before we set our rivets. You see, when you tighten these up all the way, let's get this down. When you tighten these up all the way, you have, it's hard to see, but you have this nice long crossbody strap, but then you can pull them out and you have like a backpack. Isn't that crazy? I love it. All right, let's be done with this. Let's set these rivets. So I've got 4 rivets to set. I'm just gonna press them in place. And with straps, you always have the option to just use rivets and not do any stitching at all. It will be secure. Okay, I can't get this bag, it's too big, I can't get in the shot. But here we are with our backpack straps. And then we also have our adorable shoulder strap here. So this is what those D-rings are for. So you can just hook this onto the inner D-rings. There we go. How cool is this bag? Isn't it beautiful? It takes time, but you know, all the good stuff does. It just takes time. Oh, I hope you love it, and I hope you love your mega boxes. All right, here's the thing. When I made the bold version, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna like the natural version more than that. You guys, neutral, natural, I still can't remember what we called it. This is my favorite. Look at this bag. I mean, if you didn't see me make it, you wouldn't believe I made it, right? Like if you didn't spend the last hour or so with me, you would think, there's no way, Jess, even you bought that bag, girl. No. And yours is gonna look exactly the same. Isn't that crazy? I love this so much. So if you're using the Mega Box, I will tell you the vinyls are not the same weight. This is a much more, the black vinyl is a much more firm, sturdy vinyl versus the faux leather tobacco color, I think. This is a much more, not drapey, but it's a little bit less stiff than the black, but they both come out perfect. They both yield incredible designer results with different feels. So I told you guys this, if you remember, if you got the Mega Box, I said, if possible, you might want to consider getting both. And this is why. Look at these stinking bags. They're so, so pretty. So I hope you love making this bag as much as I do. I hope it's one of your new favorite patterns because it's definitely one of my new favorite patterns. I don't even know if I'm going to give these back to Gabby or if I'm going to sell them or I'm going to keep them because honestly, like, look at this. Look at this bag. Look at this bag. Look at that. Where am I going? Anywhere. I could be going to the city. I could be going on vacation. I could be going to the grocery store. I could be a mom. I could be a teen. I could be anybody. This is so stinking cute. I just love it. And honestly, it even is, I would say, pretty gender neutral. This is definitely a bag that doesn't scream feminine. So if you need like a travel bag for a guy in your life, I feel like this would be great for like air travel, things like that. I don't know. There's a lot you can do with this, guys. I hope you enjoyed sewing with me today. Have a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.